Hey, mamas. Welcome back to Conquering Chaos, a mom's guide to self-care and sanity. I'm your host, Sydney Crow, and today we have Mandy Schaniel from Southern California. She is the founder and CEO of Schaniel Consulting Incorporated. Sorry, a little tongue-tied there. Her rise to leadership came early when she was recruited to join the executive team at ZipRecruiter as an employee number 19. Her time at ZipRecruiter led to early retirement, which has allowed her to take her passion for leadership and mentorship to the next level. In her debut book, Faith Over Fear: How to Adopt a Success Mindset, Mandy offers a one-on-one style reading experience, providing practical and actionable tips for achieving success in every area of life. One of the final lessons in the book is the power of lifting others up, which she embodies in her commitment to donating 10% of her net proceeds from the book to various nonprofit organizations. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to kick this call off. You and I were just chatting prior to the call, and I feel like you have such an amazing outlook, just given your circumstances, given the ability to retire very early. Why don't you fill the listeners in on who you are and what you're all about?
Sure, absolutely. So, as you said, my career grew very quickly, very early, and as parents, we know that kids experience some pain during growth spurts, and it is very similar when you go through the kind of growth spurt that my career went through. It was a wild ride, best experience of my life at ZipRecruiter, and it was not without its moments of fear and doubt and lack of self-confidence because things were moving so fast and I was such a newbie when it came to leadership and being an executive. But really at the end of the day, what that all taught me was that really anybody can do anything. It all comes down to your mindset. And that's something we talk about in our house with our kids quite a bit because it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day. We all have our routines, especially if you have kids. One day bleeds into the next and you've got your schedule and suddenly you're like, it's Friday. What? Let's do this all over again. And now we have sports and all of the things. Yeah. But if you're not taking the time to slow down, pause, to breathe, to think, and really focus on your mindset and your thoughts, it can just become overwhelming. You can just get into the cycle of things. And a lot of times that breeds unhappiness or negative self-talk or just feeling like something's missing. And I think that key is having those moments where we reset our mindset and we think about what means fulfillment to me, what is my purpose and what I'm doing today. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's just so easy. It takes time. And the more you are consciously aware of your thoughts, it can be scary at first, but the more you realize you have the power to control the energy you go into things with. So I was very blessed to have mentors throughout my career who would tell me to slow down, slow your roll. Let's think about this for a minute. You're doing a great job. When I had self-doubt and I eventually realized I was experiencing imposter syndrome, and that helped me a lot. So my goal with writing this book is to try to bring that to everybody. It doesn't matter if it's about your job or parenting or relationships or your health. It all ties together, and the same concepts of resilience and mindset really play a huge role in the success that you have in anything that you do.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so important. And I think a lot of people, especially when you have a lot of success off the in the beginning of a career, that imposter syndrome can creep in, right? You have like in life, business can be kind of up and down. And when you go through those downturns, it can be like, oh, well, maybe this is it. And maybe it's like, maybe that was just like a one-hit wonder type thing. And you start to have that little ego voice start creeping in. And that's not there to serve you in those moments.
No.
So why don't you tell the listeners what your top 3 tips around mindset are in terms of overcoming that imposter syndrome?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is find time, whatever works for you, find time to dedicate to what I call think time. So whether you are working full time or working full time in the home, because that is a full-time job as well, whatever
Sure.
your situation is, whether you're in an office, a home office, or in the home, do you use a calendar? Put it on your calendar. It is so powerful to dedicate that time where you know you're not doing drop off or pickup or meetings or whatever may be part of your day, and you dedicate time to think. And this throws a lot of people off. In my business career, this was something I had everyone who reported to me who was really struggling to find what was next and kind of figure things out. I would say, block an hour off on your calendar. Let's start with at least once a week, but eventually I'd like you to do it every day. And they're like, what are you talking about? An hour a day where I do nothing? And I'm like, yes, we are not laborers. That wasn't the business that we were in. We are thought workers. So you're actually doing the company and yourself a disservice by not dedicating time to just think. Let your brain process. No direction at all. Sit and think. You will be amazed by the connections that are made and the things that come up, and you realize, oh, I wouldn't have come to that idea or that next step if I hadn't taken the time to pause. So that's one thing, is making sure you're giving yourself and your brain. There's so much going on around us. If we don't take that time, our brain's just going like crazy, and it doesn't have time to settle and to process what's happening and what we can learn from it. That's the next thing, is looking at every experience you go through as an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to learn. And that's really what a growth mindset is all about, right? You kind of referenced it earlier. A fixed mindset is, I encounter this challenge. Maybe it's a downturn, or maybe it's a challenge with my child's behavior or something going on in the home, whatever it may be. We all encounter challenges, and it doesn't go great. And a fixed mindset would go, oh, well, I'm just not capable of excelling in that area, or I can't move past that roadblock. It doesn't serve you, right? A growth mindset is one that takes that power back in situations like that and says, okay, this is something I need to learn from. How can I learn to tackle this obstacle the next time it happens? What could I have done differently? What skills do I need to attain in order to succeed the next time this comes around? And it flips the switch. It really changes your mentality from things are happening to me, or not having faith in yourself, to I have the power and I'm going to overcome this. That's a powerful position to be in, and everyone has the ability to do that.
Yeah,
And
getting rid of that victim mentality, right?
exactly. And lastly, I would say one of the most important themes, of course, in my book, as you can assume by the title, is just to have faith in yourself. We all go through periods of doubt. And in fact, I was just talking to a friend this morning, and I was telling her, I'm like, it's really interesting how after writing this book, so much of that stuff bubbles back up, because I'm reopening all of those things and experiences I've been through. And I have a tendency to be critical of myself. And so if I doubt, I'm like, what are you doing? You have to be living faith. You have such strong faith. What are you doing? And I realized doubt is actually a blessing, because if you didn't encounter anything that challenged your faith or your belief in yourself or anything outside of yourself, you wouldn't have as many opportunities to appreciate it and to reaffirm it. So as we go through life and whatever experiences come our way, instead of harping on ourselves, and I'm talking to myself here as well, when we have those moments of doubt, be like, oh, thank you so much. What a blessing. Thank you for the reminder that I do actually have this wonderful, huge amount of faith in myself and all of these things outside of myself. And that was a great reminder. I needed that today. It's just flipping it. You have control over adjusting those scenarios and how you look at it. And it can make the difference between having a terrible, no good, horrible day to having a wonderful, purposeful day,
100%. And it is, I mean, we are in control of ourselves. We can't control the things that are going on around us, the people that are going around us. we can only control ourselves. And so if you have these things where you're, riding those highs and lows and those roller coasters of emotions, you have to learn how to rein that in and put that spin on it so that you don't get stuck in that victim mentality, because it can be very easy to get stuck there, right? We have these picture perfect windows on social media now. There's a billion different opinions at our fingertips with the internet. Like, you can Google anything and get, 100 different responses as to like how you should tackle this or what the right course of action is. And it can be really, overwhelming and confusing. And so then you kind of get stuck in this like fight or flight situation. And when you can lean into your faith instead and just know that the power is within you, then you will find yourself not stuck there.
Absolutely. And as parents too, I always say this to any woman I've ever mentored who is thinking about kids or has children. A lot of times, unfortunately, we seem to be wired, and maybe it's a societal thing. We probably won't tackle that today, but we seem to be wired to be more willing to do things for other people than for ourselves, right? We put ourselves on the back burner. So I always tell women who are kind of in that mentality, they fall into those patterns, which, I've been one of them, is if you're finding it difficult to dedicate this time and these efforts because you need it, think about doing it for your children. Or, as a leader, think about doing it for your employees, or, if they don't have children or whatever, because the two are very intertwined.
Yes, they are.
But if we, all of the things you mentioned about social media and how it gives us this comparison syndrome, and it's very different than reality, our kids are growing up in that world way more than we did. And you can limit them from social media. Eventually, I mean, even if they don't have access to it, they're going to hear about it from friends. They're going to see it on friends' phones and devices. It's inevitable, right? So if we want them to have the power to control their thoughts and their reactions to things and really step into the power of what they can do and how they want to live life, we have to do it first. So that I think is another little mindset hack, right? If you're struggling to do things for yourself as a parent, do it for your kids until you realize that you really need to do it for yourself, and there's value in that.
Yeah, well, and I think that kind of nodes to like Simon Sinek's The Power of Why, right? Because even if we don't have that same faith or belief in ourselves or our willingness to show up, like you were saying, for ourselves, I would say 99% of moms are willing to do way more for their kids than they ever will for themselves.
Right.
And like you said, we're constantly putting ourselves on the back burner. And I love that this, like I've done quite a few episodes where we've talked about that, and self-care as being a necessity. And there's a reason why they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first when the plane is going down. And there's all of these sayings and phrases that society leans into. But it's how do we overcome that? How do we actually step into that power and make the time for ourselves? And a lot of women need to start with like, I'll do it for my kids.
Yep.
It really is.
And there's another trick that I use, and I think the Navy SEALs actually invented it or coined the term micro tasks.
Okay.
So incredibly powerful. It's actually how I wrote my book in less than a year. I learned it through the 75 Hard program by Andy Frisella. And because at first I did the whole Live Hard year. And at first there were certain tasks that, 10 minutes of guided visualization a day, which was not something I was used to at the time. I'm like, 10 minutes, what is that going to do for me? And I very quickly realized how powerful it was. And so I really leaned into it, and I did some research on micro tasks, and I was like, this is a game changer. So when I did retire from working full-time for someone else and started writing my book, it took me a bit to figure out where I was going to write, what my writing process looked like, and what was going to work for me. Because at that point, I could not work in my office. I'd like, nothing would happen. I was so used to working in my office, and I was like, this is not working for me. And so eventually I just said, okay, 15 minutes a day working on the book, whether it's research, writing, thinking, whatever, it's open, 15 minutes a day. And so that was the micro task I assigned to myself. And the beauty of it is you number one, it's such a small amount of time. You can't come up with an excuse not to do it. And number two, you wind up getting so into it, you spend significantly more time more often than not. So the progress that you're making snowballs. So, and there were days certainly where I wasn't feeling great, didn't really feel like doing it, or didn't think I had any ideas. So I'd spend the 15 minutes and then I was done, but I could check that off. And what happens is you check something like that off of your list, whether it's digital or on paper,
Yeah.
and you release dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. And
All
those
those
are
goods.
all the happy brain chemicals, the reward
Yeah.
system in your brain that encourages you and says like, hey, let's keep doing that. That felt really good. And it builds that discipline and those good habits. So same thing applies. You can use it for anything. Anytime I feel like I'm in a slump, I'll create a little micro task for myself. And I'm like, I feel so good. I got that done. I'm doing this consistently. That feels great.
Yeah, and I find that like for me, I need that. So like I've started doing like a digital habit tracker, for example. I've always drank an okay amount of water, but I never really like tracked it. And so now I have like a little automated checkbox that I can like check off how many bottles of water I have every day. And you're right, like it feels good because you feel accomplished with what you're doing. And it can be as small a task as drinking water to as large a task as writing the chapters of your book or beyond that, right? So why don't we dive into a little bit more about your book? Why don't you tell the listeners what it's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really about I broke it up into kind of a flow that you can go through if you're in a place of life where you're trying to figure out what is a purposeful goal that I can set for myself? How do I go about fulfilling it and not giving up or feeling defeated along the way? So I walk through what I call the keys to success. And we start at the very top with, let's first identify your purpose. Because at the end of the day, if you have a goal without the backing of purpose, when something comes along, fear, doubt, some sort of obstacle, a failure, what have you, you're less likely to push through it if there's not a very strong purpose that you can tie to other people. So I encourage people to look for the ripple effect. Who will be impacted outside of myself if I accomplish this goal? What good can I do through accomplishing this goal? And if it's health related, your kids, your family, inspiring other people around you, things like that. So really looking at that bigger picture and establishing that first, because again, at the end of the day, if we're chasing after goals that don't have deep-seated meaning for us, that don't generate fulfillment, it's going to be a lot harder to push through when it gets tough, and inevitably it will get tough. So I walk through various stages of outlining goals and how to map them out, how to start small. Let's do this without stress. This is the main purpose. Let's eliminate stress from the process. Let's take it slow so we don't burn ourselves out. And let's do something meaningful and fulfilling. I do talk a lot about leadership in the book as well. So from a perspective of whether you work in a business of some sort, understanding the different leadership styles that you might be encountering, how to work with them, how to leverage the pros and cons of each of the styles, but also realizing that no matter what your position is, you are a leader. Everyone in life has the opportunity to be a leader, especially as parents. We are leaders. And so really identifying, what is my leadership style? What are the pros and cons of it? How can I kind of borrow from other styles and be the best leader that I can be? So I think that's an important part of the process of achieving any goal and really achieving fulfillment in life. So I tell a lot of stories about failures that I've made, slip ups, little funny anecdotes, things along the way, and some inspiring quotes and stories from others that I find inspiring. But the whole goal is really a message of, you can do anything you set your mind to, and let's walk through the easiest way to do it without stressing yourself out.
I think that's so important because there is a ton of personal development books out there, but I feel like a lot of them are geared more towards like a masculine style energy. And when you talked about like it was almost like hitting the easy button and not having extra stress, like that's a mom's like holy grail right there, right? We
Right.
all want an easier path. We don't want stress. We want to be able to show up as our best selves and be the leaders that our kids need us to be. But also like a lot of times our plates feel really, really full. So when you go to take on like I'm ready for the next level, I want to, improve on myself and improve on my leadership skills. A lot of these books I find are like very masculine dominated and almost in an overwhelming state. I'm like, yeah, okay, I could do that, but like I might end up in burnout if I keep going at that pace.
Right. You tend to have one of two reactions to those types of books, right? Either it like fires you up, and then I used to consistently run too hard, too fast at things and then burn out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sick of doing that. I don't want to do that anymore. Or it kind of totally turns you off. You're like, well, my whole life isn't going to be about this one thing. I'm juggling a family and children, and I have these big responsibilities that this has to fit into. And so that's kind of why I wanted to connect all of the dots that I've learned along the way many times through failing at them several times until I learned the lesson. So
Fair.
hopefully my readers don't have to do the same thing, but we've all been there. But you're right. It's really about finding a way to move forward without making it feel like another heavy burden, feeling like you're in flow and it fits in with the rest of your life.
I love that. How would you say that writing this book helped your parenting?
Oh, I mean, number one, given the ages of my kids, they've been very interested in it and wanting to understand more of the book, and each have their own signed copy. Because especially my middle child, he's like, "You're going to be famous, Mom. I need it signed." And I'm like, "Okay, thank you."
Oh,
Um,
how
So
darling.
we've had lots of conversations about it, but also at the same time, it really cemented a lot of these things that I've learned. And, again, my name is on this. This advice is out there. I have to practice what I preach. So having more of those conversations with my kids has been a result of writing the book. And one of the things that I kind of came up with pretty recently, actually, if you've got kids that you drive to and from school, and depending on their ages, you get them home from school, you're in the car, and you ask them how their day was, and you get nothing out of them. And
Yeah.
so what I flipped the switch on them, and at first I was fully expecting eye rolls, and I was surprised I didn't really get them, even from my high schooler. And so I'll ask them, what, if anything, made you feel happy today? What, if anything, made you feel sad, mad? We'll just go through a bunch of different emotions. And it is wild how much more information I get out of them. And you can like almost hear the wheels turning in their brain of them processing how something made them feel. And so that is a beautiful result of this, because the more I've tapped into all of the mindset stuff that I've been working on, I'm trying to instill that in my kids. And I always tell them, I'm like, look, if you can learn like even half of this stuff that I'm trying to teach you right now, you're miles ahead of a lot of adults that I've worked with who are, leaders of companies who don't understand this yet. No, no harm, no foul. They didn't learn it then. Our kids are having the blessing of learning a lot of these social emotional stuff in school today, but we have to really bolster that at home as well. So there's a tip if that helps any parents who get nothing on their car ride home, which I used to. It's really fun to see how they process and what emotions they tie to different events in their day.
Oh, I love that. I'm definitely going to try it this week. If you could give one last piece of advice out there to the moms listening or the parents or anybody that's out there listening, what would you say that piece of advice would be?
I would say stop being so hard on yourself. As parents, leaders, just people in general, especially women, we tend to be incredibly critical of ourselves. And at the end of the day, every parent, leader, person in life is going to realize at some point in time they could have done something better, or they missed, they missed it here or there. All is not lost. You can always pick things up and improve on things. That doesn't have to come from a place of negativity or criticism or being down on yourself. It's about, again, taking that power and going, okay, that didn't go well, or that wasn't the way I really wanted that to turn out. So what can I do better? What can I learn? How can I make this better in the future? That can come from a positive place and still acknowledge the need for growth. So that would be the biggest message. Stop being so hard on yourself.
I love that. And such an important message as moms to teach our kids that, right? I mean,
Yes.
our kids can be their worst critics just as we are. And teaching them that resilience piece is so important. So thank you so
Yes.
much for being here today, Mandy. We will have a link for your book in the show notes. So if you guys want to get a copy of Faith Over Fear, then that will be available to you guys. And thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode where we help you conquer the chaos one day at a time.